The dinner before her 18th birthday felt like a verdict already decided. We sat around the table in that rented house outside Portland, the one with thin walls and a roof I'd patched twice myself. The air smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. Laura's cooking. Familiar. Safe. I remember thinking, this is what stability looks like. Plates lined up. Glasses filled. Everyone present. Emma didn't look at me when she spoke. She cut her food carefully, precise, like she'd rehearsed this. The best gift you could give me, she said calmly, is to disappear from our lives. No anger. No tears. Just fact. I felt something shift inside my chest, like a support beam snapping quietly behind drywall. I waited for the punchline, for the teenage cruelty to soften into sarcasm. Didn't. She finally looked up at me then. Her eyes were steady, almost bored. You're just not my dad. You're an imposter. The word sat there between the salt and the breadbasket. Imposter. As if I'd forged my way into their lives instead of earning every inch with overtime and silence. I turned to Laura, my wife. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. This was the moment where she would step in. Correct it. Protect what we'd built. She nodded. Just nodded. Then she added, gently, like she was explaining a scheduling change, her real father will handle things now. That was worse than the words. Because Emma was 18 tomorrow, and I realized my role had always come with an expiration date. For years, I thought I was part of a family. Turns out I was a function, a gap filler, the man who kept the fridge full and the tires rotated, the one who paid for piano lessons, orthodontics, tampons, and textbooks without ever being acknowledged in a single thank you card. I wasn't the man who tucked her in after nightmares or showed up on picture day. I was the man who picked up the bill after the lights went out and no one else answered. And now I was being dismissed like a waiter who'd outlived his shift. No ceremony. No appreciation. No attempt to soften the cruelty. Just one child grown enough to use words as knives. And one woman too cowardly to speak on my behalf. I stared at Laura longer than I looked at Emma. I wanted to see something, anything, in her face. Guilt. Shame. Even relief. Instead, I saw nothing. Not even discomfort. As if she'd been waiting for this too. She poured herself another glass of wine and changed the subject. I stayed silent through dessert. Strawberry shortcake. Store-bought. I remember the white plastic lid, the thin film of condensation. I remember the way Laura laughed when she asked Emma if she wanted candles or just blow out the past. They both laughed. I didn't. I left the dishes in the sink and went upstairs. Brushed my teeth. Sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the carpet until midnight. My hands were still. My breathing even. It wasn't rage. Not sadness either. It was something worse. Certainty. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a mood or a phase or a rebellion I could weather. This was the truth surfacing after years of forced civility and tight smiles. I had been necessary, not loved. Convenient, not respected. Useful, but never real. I remembered the birthday parties I paid for. Every themed plate, every clown, every gift. I remembered the late nights helping with science projects that she swore her real dad would have made better. I remembered the soccer cleats I drove an hour to find in her exact size, only for her to leave them muddy in the garage. Every small sacrifice had come with a whispered hope. One day, she'll see. But that day never came. Instead, she gave me this disappearance as a gift. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the foot of the bed and played every memory in reverse. Her first day of high school. The time I drove her to a sleepover in a snowstorm. The hours I spent assembling IKEA furniture for her college apartment while she stayed glued to her phone, texting God knows who. There was no montage of gratitude. No highlight reel of affection. Just a ledger. Every line item weighed against silence. Every kindness met with distance. I saw it clearly now. This wasn't betrayal. Betrayal assumes something sacred was broken. No, this was correction. The illusion collapsing under its own weight. By sunrise, the decision was made. I got dressed. Coffee. Black. No breakfast. I walked outside and took a slow lap around the house. The house I kept running. The house they treated like a stage and I, the lighting technician, always behind the curtain. I looked at the leaky gutter I'd fixed last spring. The garden box I'd built from salvaged cedar. The porch swing that squeaked because no one but me oiled the hinges. I said goodbye without a sound. That morning I called the realtor. Asked how soon we could list. She asked if I needed to talk to my family. No, I said. It's just me. Next I logged into the bank. Accounts, transfers, credit lines. I shut them down one by one. Emma's college payments. Gone. Her car insurance. Gone. The rent I'd covered on her off-campus apartment. Frozen. I didn't do it in anger. I did it with a kind of calm precision. The kind you use to amputate something infected. No theatrics. No confrontation. Just absence. I packed my things in silence. My tools. My documents. My jacket with the torn cuff. I left the suits. They were for a man who still needed to perform. By noon I was gone. No note. No drama. Just a house, still warm from the heater I'd paid to replace. Humming with the knowledge that the man who kept it running had vanished. The first call came 2 days later. Laura. Missed call. Then another. Emma. Blocked number. Then text messages. Something's wrong with the tuition account. Are you out of town? Call me back. This isn't funny. Funny. They thought this was a game. Like I'd vanished as some kind of protest. Waiting to be coaxed back with apologies and half-hearted hugs. They didn't understand what had happened. I hadn't left them. I had let go of something that was never mine. Emma didn't want me to be her father. Laura didn't want me to be her partner. They wanted a man to stand quietly in the wings, paying for the spotlight while they smiled for the crowd. They got what they wanted. Their panic came in waves, voicemails growing longer, more frantic. Laura started reaching out through friends, then family. She even called my office. I left my job a week later. They couldn't find me. They couldn't reach me. Because for once I was unreachable. For once, I wasn't available to fix the mess. Wasn't there to carry the guilt that never belonged to me. The silence felt holy. Their lives began unraveling without me. The bills stacked. The college demanded payment. Emma's car was towed. The power company left red envelopes. I watched it all from a distance, unmoved, not because I didn't care, because I had already cared more than anyone ever asked me to. I had offered myself as family. They declined. All I did was honor their request. I wasn't their father, so I stopped pretending. And in that choice, I found something better than forgiveness. I found freedom. So I ask you, what do you owe to people who never considered you real? When they speak the truth that you are not one of them, do you fight to stay, or do you finally listen? Because I did. And I walked away. And I didn't look back. I didn't miss them. That's what surprised me. There was no ache. No withdrawal. No reaching for my phone to check in. No idle impulse to return to the rhythm of the house. Just silence. And beneath it, something steadier than peace. Conviction. I stayed in a short-term rental an hour east. Unfurnished. Sparse. A mattress on the floor, folding table by the window, the smell of new drywall still clinging to the air. I didn't decorate. I didn't unpack. I kept a single chair, a single lamp. It was enough. For the first time in years, I could hear myself think without interruption. I spent the first week reviewing everything. My accounts. My debts. The investments I'd delayed because there was always another emergency to cover. Braces, school trips, broken phones. I mapped out what I had left. What I had wasted. They never asked me how much I had given. No one ever does. Because it's invisible, the money of a stepfather. It's not child support. It's not obligation. The sacrifice by choice, which means it's forgettable. Erasable. Untraceable. No receipts. Just a man who keeps saying yes long after he should have stopped. But I had stopped now. And they noticed. Emma's university left 3 voicemails in 5 days. Laura forwarded them all to my old email. Subject line, please respond. I didn't open them. Then came the texts. Screenshots of overdue notices. Threats of de-enrollment. Then Emma herself. I don't understand why you're doing this. You always said you'd take care of college. I stared at the message for a long time. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd said that night. Just the assumption of service. Like I was a utility. Like I was her water bill, essential until forgotten. I didn't reply. 2 days later, Laura called again. I answered this time, not to explain but to listen, to see if anything had changed. Where are you? Her voice was sharp, panicked, thin with exhaustion. I didn't answer. You can't just disappear like this, she snapped. You scared her. She's falling apart. Tuition's due this week. What are we supposed to do? I waited a moment, then said calmly, her real father will handle it now. Silence. I could hear her breath catch. That's not fair. No, I said. It isn't. She hung up. The next day she tried again. The tone was different. Soft. Strategic. She used my name like punctuation. Michael, we need to talk. Emma didn't mean it. She was upset. You know how she is. No. I knew how she was when things were easy. When the checks cleared. When the car ran. When the heat worked. I never knew how she was when I withdrew. Until now. You heard what she said, I replied. You agreed. I didn't mean it like that. You nodded, Laura. I looked you in the eye and you nodded. There was a pause. Then she tried guilt. You helped raise her. You were there for everything. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It did. She grew quiet. Then angry. You're punishing her. No, I said. I'm just removing myself from a job I was fired from. More silence. Then the click of a call ended without goodbye. It didn't bother me. In fact, it made things easier. I deleted her number that night. Emma didn't reach out again, not directly. But I heard from her friends. One of them messaged me on Facebook. Another emailed from a school account. I didn't recognize their names. Strangers asking favors on behalf of someone who hadn't spoken to me with warmth in years. One girl wrote, she's freaking out. She says she didn't mean what she said. That you were always good to her. That she's sorry. But she wasn't. She was scared. There's a difference. Fear isn't remorse. Panic isn't love. Desperation isn't apology. I didn't reply, because what would I say? You told me to disappear, so I did. The house sold in less than a week. I kept the proceeds. I had paid the mortgage. My name was on the paperwork. Laura hadn't contributed a cent in 2 years. She didn't even ask for her share. She knew better. I left the keys in the mailbox and never looked back. The utilities shut off on schedule. I made sure of it. Internet, water, gas, power. All the invisible comforts I had maintained with quiet reliability. All gone. They called the company in a panic, thinking it was a mistake. It wasn't. I made sure the mail stopped forwarding. I wanted them to feel it. Not my revenge, but the weight of my absence. They had made it clear I wasn't one of them. Now they'd learn what life looked like without me propping it up. By the 3rd week, Laura showed up at my rental. I saw her through the peephole, tired, thinner, carrying a manila folder. I didn't answer the door. She knocked for 20 minutes. Once she sat down on the step. Then she left. The folder stayed behind. Inside, copies of Emma's tuition bill, a handwritten note. We made a mistake. Please call. As if guilt shared was guilt erased. As if 2 people being cruel somehow made it more forgivable. I shredded the papers and threw them away. They didn't need me. They had said so. They had used the word imposter, a term that leaves no room for gray. I wasn't family. I was furniture. Useful. Disposable. Forgettable. Let them learn what happens when the furniture walks out. 1 month passed. Then 2. The messages slowed. The calls stopped. The silence deepened. And still I felt no urge to return. Because I wasn't grieving them. I was grieving the lie I'd built. I had told myself for years that love was enough. That patience would be repaid. That if I just kept giving, eventually I would be seen, not as a stand-in but as a man who mattered. But respect doesn't grow from generosity. It grows from boundaries. And I had lived without any. I had let myself be used. And now I was unlearning that. Some nights I lay awake and replayed it all. Not with sadness. With clarity. Every dinner where Emma ignored me. Every holiday where Laura's ex sent gifts and she lit up like he was a hero. Every time I was introduced as her mom's husband. Like I was the punctuation at the end of a better man's sentence. I let it happen. That was my sin. I thought love meant endurance. It doesn't. Love without respect is servitude. And I had been a servant in my own home. But not anymore. I got a new number. New address. I left no forwarding. If they wanted to find me, they'd have to search for the man they'd spent years erasing. They'd have to earn what they once assumed was permanent. They never did. Weeks turned to months. The holidays came. No card. No message. No olive branch. Which told me everything I needed to know. They didn't miss me. They missed the things I provided. And once those were gone, so was their memory of me. And that's when the truth finally settled in. I had never been their family. I had been their funding. Their fix-it man. Their emotional backstop. And when I stopped playing the part, the script simply moved on without me. They had told me I was an imposter. They weren't wrong. I just wish I had realized it sooner. So I ask you, when the people you love make it clear you're replaceable, do you stay? Do you keep giving? Or do you do what I did? Disappear. Without sound. Without explanation. Without regret. Because sometimes the only way to be heard is to vanish completely. And let the silence speak for itself. It started with a notice on bright red paper. Folded twice. Taped to the door of their new apartment. The one they had leased a few weeks after the house sold. Cheaper, smaller, just outside Tigard. I knew the complex. I had driven past it once before. Tenants hung rugs from the railings. Kids played in the parking lot because the grass was too patchy for soccer. It wasn't the kind of place Emma dreamed of when she toured campuses and posted dorm halls on Instagram. But dreams cost money. And I wasn't paying anymore. The notice was for unpaid utilities. I hadn't canceled those accounts out of cruelty. I canceled them because they were in my name. Because I was the one who had signed, logged in, auto-drafted, renewed. For years. The moment I shut it down, everything that had once been invisible became loud. Heat went off during a rainstorm. Internet went down during midterms. Their comfort had always been contingent. They just didn't know it. Until I stopped carrying the weight. Then came the school emails. Overdue. Unpaid. Final warning. Emma's enrollment hung in the balance. She tried every angle. First, polite. Can you just help until the end of the semester? I'll figure it out after. Then, accusatory. I gave you one bad moment and now you're throwing everything away? And finally, manipulative. If I drop out, is that what you want on your conscience? No mention of her birthday dinner. No mention of imposter. No ownership. Just expectations framed as morality. As if I owed her redemption because she finally felt consequence. But you can't build guilt on a foundation you already burned. I didn't reply. She moved back in with Laura. Which meant bills piled faster. Groceries. Gas. Shared data plans. Rent that Laura couldn't cover alone. I had always known the margins were thin. I had just chosen not to look too closely. I told myself I was doing it for family. That every overdraft I plugged, every car repair I paid for, was an investment in belonging. But belonging shouldn't cost thousands a month. And when I walked away, the numbers exposed the truth. They weren't just hurting, they were unraveling. And I didn't feel sorry. I felt justified. Laura tried one last time. Not in words. In money. She sent a formal request through her lawyer, masked as a mediation notice. I read the document twice. They were asking for retroactive support, citing shared marital responsibility for Emma's education. It was a bluff. There had never been any contract. No signed agreement. No joint application for aid. Just me, quiet, dependable me, paying for tuition from an account only I had access to. They thought the legal route might shame me. Instead, it confirmed what I already knew. They had nothing left but desperation. I called her lawyer. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I read off the payments I had made in the past 5 years. Each transfer, each charge, each semester covered without co-signature. He grew quiet. "Would you be willing to settle privately?" he asked finally. "I already have," I said. "I settled the day I stopped paying." Emma called 2 days later. She didn't leave a voicemail, but her number sat on my call log like a wound. I didn't return it, because if she wanted to talk, to really talk, she would have to do it without a script. And she wasn't ready for that. Instead, I heard from her advisor, a polite, concerned voice, just checking in regarding the financial aid documentation. "We've been informed of some changes in your status." I told her the truth. I'm not her father. I'm not responsible. She hesitated. "I understand. Would you still like to be listed as an emergency contact?" I laughed. Couldn't help it. "No," I said. "Not anymore." The words felt lighter than I expected, like letting go of a rope I didn't know was choking me. After that, the silence deepened. No more calls. No more threats. Just absence. The same kind I had delivered weeks before, now mirrored in their retreat. I knew they were struggling. I knew Laura had picked up a second job, retail, part-time. That Emma was borrowing a friend's laptop to submit papers. That the car I had paid off had been sold for tuition they still couldn't afford. And I didn't stop them, because I had learned the difference between suffering and learning. And they were learning. That love without gratitude curdles. That support without respect collapses. That when you burn the bridge, the water beneath is cold. I remember sitting at my new kitchen table, checking my accounts and realizing for the first time in years, there was no emergency, no overdue bill, no text begging for help at 2 a.m. Just balance, just silence, just me. And I began to see how far I had bent to make myself useful. How many pieces I had carved from my own body to build someone else's comfort. How many apologies I had swallowed to keep peace that no one else was maintaining. They never once thanked me. Not once. Not when I fixed the roof leak at midnight. Not when I paid for Emma's dental surgery. Not when I sold my grandfather's watch to cover the deposit on her first apartment. And yet they acted as though I owed them everything. Because I had made it easy. Because I had never said no. Until I did. The next letter came from Emma's father. Not directly, he wasn't the kind of man who spoke face to face. Came as a legal inquiry. He was petitioning for shared custody. Of what, I don't know. She was 18. But he was trying to look like a father now that bills had surfaced with his name on them. He wanted credit. Without debt. He wanted the image. Without cost. Typical. Laura must have pushed him into it. Or maybe Emma had. Maybe they believed a biological connection could conjure resources. Maybe they thought a courtroom would reframe abandonment as legacy. But the court didn't care. He had no history of contribution. No pattern of involvement. And when they asked him why he hadn't paid before, he said, "I didn't think I had to. Michael always handled it." There it was. The quiet truth. Spoken aloud. I had always handled it. And now I didn't. And now everything was collapsing. I didn't go to the hearing. I didn't submit a statement. I didn't need to. Their new life was being built on paper, thin, desperate, flammable. And I had already walked through fire. The worst part? They still didn't understand. They still believed I had done this to them. They didn't see it as the end of grace. They saw it as betrayal, which meant they hadn't learned a thing. But I had. I learned that sacrifice without recognition becomes resentment. That giving endlessly isn't noble, it's suicidal. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do is vanish, so they can feel the hole you once filled. And maybe, if they're lucky, grow into the shape of it themselves. That's what real parenting is. Isn't it? Not paying bills. Not fixing problems. But letting the consequences arrive when they're due. Letting people fall when they insist they can fly alone. That's what I gave them. Not absence. Not abandonment. But accountability. The bill came due. And this time I didn't pay it. Because I was done financing my own erasure. So tell me, when the people who relied on your sacrifice spit in your face, and the debt collector comes knocking, would you still reach for your wallet? Or would you finally let the silence answer for you? I never thought silence could be so loud. It followed me everywhere. Down grocery aisles, into gas stations, through the empty echo of a Sunday morning with no one waiting at home. No voice calling my name from the top of the stairs. No footsteps overhead. Just the hum of a refrigerator, the shuffle of my own shoes. At first, I mistook it for loneliness. But it wasn't. Loneliness has yearning. This was something colder. Something quieter. This was release. I didn't check social media anymore. I deleted my profiles weeks after leaving. Not out of spite, but because I couldn't bear to see them carrying on as if I hadn't existed. And that's exactly what they tried to do. First, photos with filtered light and fake smiles. Emma posing with classmates. Laura tagging herself at brunch spots with friends I'd once repaired fences for. It was all curated to imply nothing had changed. But change doesn't care about appearances. It lives in unpaid balances. It lives in eviction notices, in the look of your daughter when she realizes her student ID doesn't swipe anymore. It lives in the breath your wife draws when she finally understands the man she kept at arm's length was the one who kept the ceiling from falling. They tried to keep it going. For a while. Then the cracks widened. I heard through a mutual friend that Emma had dropped out. Too many missed payments. Too much stress. She told people it was a personal choice, that college wasn't for her. But I'd seen the tuition statements. I knew how close she'd gotten to finishing. She was 3 courses from a degree. 3. That's what pride costs when it's weaponized too early. The same friend told me Laura was living in a smaller place now. A single bedroom near a bus line. She'd sold her car. Working mornings at a local medical office. Evenings as a cashier at a pharmacy. Her smile, they said, had changed. I didn't feel sorry. But I did feel something. Pity? No. Recognition. She'd become what I had been. Someone holding the roof up with both arms while the people beneath it forgot to say thank you. And I wondered, did she finally understand me? Or did she just resent me more? That question haunted me more than it should have. Because part of me, some small, stupid part, still wanted acknowledgement. Not forgiveness. Not regret. Just recognition. Of what I had done. Of who I had been. And yet, I knew better than to expect it. Because people don't see the dam until it breaks. They don't thank the wall until it falls down. And I had fallen. I had fallen all the way out of their lives. Emma tried once more. Months after the fallout. I don't know what moved her, if it was desperation or guilt or simply boredom. But she found me. She showed up outside my work. I saw her from the break room window, standing near the lot, arms crossed, phone in hand like a shield. I didn't go out. I let her wait. She stayed for 20 minutes. Then she left. I never heard from her again. I wish I could say that hurt, that it pierced me, that I stood in that break room and felt my chest collapse. But I didn't. I just watched. I watched until her silhouette disappeared behind the corner of the building. Then I washed out my coffee mug and went back to work. Because she hadn't come to reconnect. She had come to reclaim. She hadn't brought remorse. She had brought expectation. And I had nothing left to give. I had already given everything. That's what I want you to understand. If you've read this far, if you've followed the thread through every fracture, then know this, the worst part isn't the betrayal. It's the realization that the betrayal had always been there. Waiting, dormant, like mold behind drywall. All it took was one humid night to bring it to the surface. They never saw me as theirs. They saw me as a stopgap. I was the scaffolding until the structure felt strong enough to stand without me. Then they pulled me down. Not with violence. With a nod. With the word imposter. With silence. I remember sitting at a red light weeks later, hands on the wheel, and thinking, I could have died in that house and no one would have noticed until the power shut off. And that was the moment the grief ended. Because grief implies love. And what I felt, what I had always felt, was obligation misnamed. Responsibility disguised as affection. I wasn't part of a family. I was part of a system. I was a mechanism. Remove me and the machine stalls. But no one thanks the gear when the clock works. They only curse it when it doesn't. So I let the clock stop. I let the house go cold. I let the tuition go unpaid. And the world didn't end. It just got quieter. And then, eventually, clearer. I moved again. Farther this time. New town. New address. Kept my name. I wasn't hiding. I had nothing to run from. But I chose a place where no one knew the version of me who apologized for existing. Where no one expected me to pay for the sins of another man's absence. And in that new town, I found something strange. Peace. Not joy. Not yet. But peace. I bought a small home. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. No lawn. Just enough space for a chair, a desk, and silence. I filled it with things I liked. Photographs I took myself. Books I never had time to read. Tools I used because I wanted to, not because something was broken. I planted herbs on the windowsill. Basil, thyme, cilantro. They grew. Because I remembered to water them. Because I wanted to. Not because someone else would get upset if I didn't. And that, I realized, was the lesson. Love isn't obligation. Love is choice. Repeated. Consistent. Respect isn't claimed through blood. It's earned through presence. And presence means nothing when the people around you pretend you're not there. I gave 16 years of my life to a family that never spoke my name without a qualifier. Step. Not real. Her husband. I was a parent when it was useful. A ghost when it wasn't. And now I am alone. But I am not empty. Because the absence is mine. I chose it. I built it. I maintain it. And I would rather live inside a quiet truth than a loud lie. So if you're wondering how it ends, let me tell you, it doesn't. There is no final phone call. No reconciliation. No Thanksgiving miracle. There is only silence. And sometimes that silence is sacred. Sometimes it is the sound of self-respect. Sometimes it is the only honest thing left. So I ask you, was I wrong? Was I cruel? Was I selfish to finally choose myself? Or was it the only way to stop drowning in a house where no one even noticed I was underwater? Tell me, if you had spent years as a stranger in your own life, would you have stayed? Or would you have done what I did? Stepped out, shut the door, and let the silence answer for you?